What's up, guys? It's Brandon Warren, and welcome to Saneball. It is the new video blog that I have started here on YouTube, and it's about basically anything that comes up with baseball with the mentality of a sane person. So I guess my goal with this show is to try to have sane conversations about anything that comes up in the game. It can be wide-ranging, it can be local for one specific team, like Houston Astros stealing signs. It could be anything. And today, it is going to be about the Hall of Fame ballot for 2020, which came out earlier this afternoon. This ballot that I have is from Ryan Thibodeau, not Mr. Tibbs on Twitter. If you are not aware, for the last 5 or 6 years, I believe, he has been counting ballots to kind of project Hall of Fame classes as they develop, to give you a pretty good idea of who's going to be in the Hall of Fame before they officially announce it when, I'm trying to remember when exactly they do that. It's in a couple months here. But anyway, it is a fun class, and we're going to go over it. We've got 10 players on the ballot for me, a few more that I would like to vote for on an unlimited ballot, but we'll get to that when we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So again, this is Saneball. It is going to be a routine, regular YouTube show, again, talking about things from a sane point of view. I reserve the right to change my mind if evidence is produced or provided to me that is going to say that maybe I wasn't thinking as clearly about a point of view that I have early on. So I'm going to encourage people to be interactive in the comments. Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Warren. This is a very, very low-tech podcast / video blog for now. But as I learn more video editing and, perhaps this thing takes off with subscribers, the more I can put into it. So for now, it's just me, my personal office, and that's about it. Maybe the official cat of Saneball Buster will check in from time to time. But we're just going to kind of roll with it and see what becomes of it. So, not totally sure what we're doing here, but I do want to say thank you to Giraffe Neck Mark. You know him as Mark Luino on Twitter. And it was kind of his inspiration, his discussion that got me into doing this. And hopefully we can make it a routine thing. And again, always open to topics at Brandon_Warren on Twitter. And in the comment section, I'll cruise down there every now and then. We'll have some discussions and hopefully foster not only good discussion, but future development of questions and shows. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, I'm going to try repress my Minnesotan accent, and we'll go from there. So before we get into the ballot itself, I do want to talk about performance-enhancing drugs and everything else that happens off the field. My personal philosophy when it comes to voting for the Hall of Fame, and I'm not a Hall of Fame voter. I'm, in fact, not part of the BBWAA yet. I'm in the process of hopefully getting in the next year or so. So we'll see what happens there. But for PEDs, basically it's a threefold point of view. One, we don't know who all used. I don't think that being caught alone is the bar that should be set for whether or not someone used, because getting away with it is still obviously using. Again, two, if the bar to admission of the Hall of Fame is getting caught or not, or admitting to them or not, or apologizing in this case of a couple of guys on this year's list, I'm not really comfortable with that. And number three, and maybe the most important one, if Major League Baseball was not okay with people using PEDs, they sure could have had tougher testing sooner. They did not seem to mind too much when we talk about the 1998 home run race and anything that happened during the quote-unquote steroid era of around that time. So again, if Big League Baseball, Bud Selig, and his cronies had any problems with it, it certainly didn't seem like the testing and the testing process reflected that. So when it comes to off-the-field stuff, you've got domestic violence, you've got basically whatever Curt Schilling is doing on a daily basis. To me, that's a tougher one. I will always be considering or being thoughtful of how to consider all that. For now, I'm certainly not feeling like I'm super equipped to pass judgment. And again, too, the difficulty here is that the BBWA voters did cover some of these guys because it is a 10-year voting period. Now, me, as a mid-30s guy, I mostly just watched these players as a kid. So I don't necessarily have the inside info that they would have, that they're voting based on. So there is a bit of a, I don't know what you would call it, a gray area here. So more often than not, I'm going to side with what the player did on the field, which is not to diminish the severity of whether it is talking about journalists being lynched or whatever it is that Curt Schilling has said. or domestic violence, which has been an allegation against a number of these players. So I'm going to side with kind of what's happened on the field, but again, I reserve the right to make that change because obviously we learn more, we evolve as a society and as a voting body, or a future voting body, at least in my case, hopefully. So I'm reserving the right to possibly change that in the future. Now, let's get down to brass tacks. We will go alphabetically like they do on the ballot. I did, as you can see on my ballot, kind of, I don't know, I did a kind of a mock-up. I hope you're not freezing it and looking at it and then stealing the rest, or being ready for the rest of the video, because it's got some of my check marks on it. So please just hang with me and hopefully it'll be entertaining. So number 1, Bobby Abreu, 59.8 career Fangraphs WAR spent 1996 to 2014 with the Astros, Phillies, Yankees, Angels, Dodgers, and Mets. Now, a fun thing that we're going to do here tonight is maybe just bring up how many of those teams you remember. I remember everybody maybe but the Dodgers with Abreu. But anyway, maybe one of the most underrated hitters of his era. He could really run, was not a great fielder, but did steal 20 bags 13 straight seasons. Finished as a career 291, 395, 475 hitter. So maybe the most underappreciated, underrated player of that era. For me, at this moment, he is a not right now, but on an unlimited ballot, yes, player. So for now, he's a no. And again, we have a 10-player maximum. It would be great to get that lifted to 15, but I don't think that is going to happen anytime soon. BBWAA seems to be, and the Hall of Fame itself, seems to be more looking toward a smaller hall. Now, my personal opinion, I like a larger hall. I'm not super inclusive to the point where I want Harold Baines in there, but what's done is done in that respect. So again, Bobby Abreu on a ballot of unlimited allowances, or of 15, gets in for sure, but for now he's a no. Josh Beckett is also a no. 36.3 Fangraphs WAR, spent 2001, to 2014 with the Marlins, Red Sox, and Dodgers. Did have 28.2 Baseball Reference WAR. Now I will bounce back and forth with the WAR numbers that I use, and if you're not comfortable with WAR, that's okay. I know it's not perfect. However, the Baseball Reference website is a little easier for summations, so you can look at what a guy's done through certain ages. So again, 28.2 Baseball Reference WAR through his age 29 season, but then just 650 innings from that point on. He had 1,400 innings to that point. So again, it was difficult for Beckett to keep himself healthy and just on the mound late in his career, and he was just kind of done, before he was super old. So I think he was like 34 when he was done. So not a ton of longevity there. The star shined pretty brightly for him early. He was a part of that Marlins team that I think it was 2003 won the World Series, with a baby Miggy Cabrera, and obviously some really fun young talent there, but just didn't quite stretch it out long enough. Next, we've got Heath Bell, an obvious no, fewer than 10 WAR, and so he was with the Mets, Padres, Marlins, Diamondbacks, and Rays from 2004 to 2014. For a 4-year stretch, though, from 2007 to 2010, was one of the best relievers in all of baseball. If you would believe it, second in Fangraphs WAR among relievers over that stretch. Bet you can guess who was number 1, Mariano Rivera. But not too far off, 8.8 for Rivera, 8.1 for Heath Bell. So Heath Bell, pretty darn good for a 4-year stretch there, but not good enough to be enshrined into Cooperstown, of course. So the next one, Barry Bonds, obviously a hot topic in 1986 to 2007 with the Pirates and the Giants. Again, if you want to subscribe to the idea that the PED problem means that guys are going to get in, and you want to set up a divider where you think that, if this guy hadn't used, would he have been good enough to make the Hall of Fame on his own? And again, I'm not comfortable with that standard because I don't know when a guy used. I don't know to what extent a guy used. I don't know to what extent this guy in any condition or any place was benefited to what level. Again, I realize I'm kind of tying my, kind of getting a little tongue-tied there, but Barry Bonds, 164.4 Fangraphs WAR. There is no question in my mind he was a Hall of Fame player pretty much from the moment he set foot in Pittsburgh. And so, again, I know it's controversial. He's not the nicest guy, and obviously there are more questions than answers as to what he was or wasn't on, especially during the San Francisco years at the end there. So I know it's not a popular take, but he is maybe the greatest player of all time, probably the greatest player of all time, and so I got to put him in. Eric Chavez is a no for me. 35.7 Fangraphs WAR, 1998 to 2014 with the A's, Yankees, and the Diamondbacks. I do not remember him with the Diamondbacks at all. If you remember him with the Diamondbacks, please, please, please feel free to mention it in the comments because, man alive, I don't think it was just 1 year either. I think it was 2 years. But not only that, do you remember Eric Chavez playing 5 years ago? Because I certainly don't. Now, this is a guy who was on a Hall of Fame path through age 25, so I got it here, 20.2 baseball reference WAR. Through age 28, 33.4. So your peak kind of starts at 27, 28, and he was already more than halfway there. But age 29 season was the first of quite a few injury-marred seasons. Got 2.1 baseball reference WAR that year. And then from that point on, a total of 2.0 WAR via baseball reference. So obviously a quick, precipitous decline for Chavez. I don't think we've heard the last of him. He seems to come up for managerial roles, coaching roles quite frequently every offseason. But it's a shame. You know, he was obviously one of those big names in those early 2000 A's teams with Miguel Tejada, another guy who has questions about if he was or wasn't on something. Jason Giambi, who's on this year's ballot. And, of course, the trio of Zito, Mulder, and Hudson as far as pitchers. They had a really fun team back then. You know, obviously Moneyball and all that. So we're very familiar, with what they were capable of and what they ended up not doing as opposed to what they actually did in October's. But Roger Clemens, same boat as Barry Bonds as far as, you know, did he or didn't he? We obviously have a pretty strong indication of one way or the other, or at least what we feel. But 133.7 Fangraphs WAR with the Red Sox, Blue Jays, Yankees, and Astros over the span of, let's see, like 25, 26 years, something like that, 1981 to 2007. So he played forever. Pretty much all the markers you could want. Lots of really weird stuff off the field, not just PEDs, but infidelities and stuff that we're not going to get into. And again, this is one of the dicier ones, to be honest with you. But on the field, there's no question he was a Hall of Fame competitor. And it's, grit your teeth, look the other way, and let him in. I really am not comfortable with it. But as a player, there's no doubt he was a Hall of Famer. Adam Dunn, obvious no for me. Reds, Diamondbacks, Nationals, White Sox, Oakland A's. I don't remember Oakland A's at all for him. But you say some players run like a deer in their career. You talk about, Byron Buxton for me specifically right now. He runs like a deer. Adam Dunn was more like a moose and, or a buffalo. Anything in his way, he just kind of would trample over. And that included fielding baseballs when he was with the Reds early in his career. So for a hot minute there, he kind of looked like he was hitting like a Hall of Famer, like a young, maybe a Harmon Killebrew. But there's obviously just so little defensive value, both in the outfield with the Reds and then, of course, DHing later in his career with the White Sox and so on. So obviously a terrific hitter, made plenty of money doing that, but just not on that Hall of Fame path. Sean Figgins, maybe one of the most, I don't want to say it's the biggest free agent bust of all time because it was only 4 years and $36 million, but definitely one of the most disappointing because I think because it came in a situation around the time where the Mariners signed Adrian Beltre, who early on maybe people thought was going to be a bust, and now he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. But Richie Sexson obviously wasn't very good, and Kenji Jojima ended up struggling, and so just a really tough time for the Mariners. And I want to say it was Bill Bavasi who was the GM for all those. Figgins only had one season above 5 WAR, only 2 above 4, and at age 32 just completely lost it. Minus .1 Fangraphs WAR in the final 4 years of his career, and that is a dividing line of the Angels part of his career and then everything else. He played with the Dodgers too, in addition to the Mariners, which I don't really remember. But yeah, Figgins is a no for me. Next is an interesting case, is Rafael Furcal. Excuse me. He is a no for me. 2000 to 2014 with the Braves, Dodgers, Cardinals, and Marlins. don't really remember the Marlins, but it was at the end of his career. 26.2 Baseball Reference WAR through age 28, which to me indicates a pretty good chance of making the Hall of Fame. Obviously not great, but obviously, he started really, really great with the Braves in his age 23 season, and then battled some back and elbow issues, had Tommy John surgery, only played about 650 games over his last 8 seasons, and so still managed to hit, and obviously didn't have a ton of power. He wasn't a very big guy, but those issues really, really waylaid him at the end of the career and kind of, pushed him away from the path that he was on. Jason Giambi is a no for me as well. 49.8 Fangraphs WAR, 1994 to 2014 with the A's, Yankees, Rockies, and Indians. Publicly admitted to steroids and apologized. It doesn't really matter to me one way or the other. Truly fringy for me on an unlimited ballot. I would certainly have to consider him, but for me, his WAR seems kind of low, but the bulk of it did come in 13 years from 1996 to 2008. And he kind of hung on for a while. He was what felt like a player manager / pinch hitter with the Rockies and then the Indians at the end. So on an unlimited ballot, he's really getting into that fringe for me. Probably a no, though. Up next, Todd Helton, first baseman for the Rockies for what felt like forever. His peak was incredible, but I question whether it was long enough. 5 straight years of 5 Fangraphs WAR or higher, but nothing outside of that. So on an unlimited ballot, maybe, but on this ballot, I would say no. Raul Ibanez is a definite no, 19.3 Fangraphs WAR, but he was a 3-time Seattle Mariner. Did you realize that? 2-time Kansas City Royal. Yeah, that's all I got. Sports Illustrated voted him the second nicest MLB player behind Jim Thome. Again, not really Hall of Fame caliber, but he's come up for some manager jobs. I know the Rays back after Joe Madden left. I want to say he was in the mix for the Yankee job before Aaron Boone got it, but I could be remembering wrong. But yeah, Raul Ibanez is a no. That brings us to Derek Jeter. And I know Jeter gets a lot of hate for, some of the bigger plays that he made that maybe, the dive into, into the stands. People thought it wasn't necessary, and his jump throw was maybe counterproductive. Whatever. Anyway, for me, Derek Jeter is a 100% yes, and the idea that if he played for the Royals, he wouldn't have been a Hall of Famer is hogwash. 73 Fangraphs WAR. There's no question in my mind that is what a Hall of Famer looks like. You can call him overrated. You might be right. You can call him an average at best defensive shortstop. You might be right, but he was an iconic hitter and an iconic player on some iconic teams. No question in my mind, Derek Jeter is a first ballot Hall of Famer. The only question is, will it be unanimous? And I lean toward no, but if it is, I wouldn't have any problem with it. Andrew Jones is a yes for me, and that's going to be surprising to a lot of people, but 67.0 Fangraphs WAR. He did play with the Braves, Dodgers, Rangers. I don't remember the Rangers. I don't remember the White Sox, but also he finished it up with the Yankees. For me, it's the supernova rule. If you burn quick and then burn out, but have such a high peak you get in, maybe the best defensive center fielder ever, crazy power. By those standards of the time he played, he maybe struck out a little bit more than people liked, but by today's standards, he would be one of the best players in baseball at it. And the off-field stuff is just, as you can tell, I'm kind of dancing around it because I don't really know what to say. It's difficult. So I put him in as a player, but man, I reserve the right to change my mind because, first of all, I don't think he's going to get in based on how they're going to vote this year. So next year when I examine it again, there's a very real chance that I would say, invoke the character clause or whatever they call it. Jeff Kent is a no for me this year, but would probably be on a bigger ballot. Played for the Blue Jays, Mets, Indians, Giants, Astros, and Dodgers. Not sure how many of those you remember. I don't remember the Blue Jays and the Mets because those were before my time. I didn't start really watching baseball until 93, 94. But they need to get him off the ballot so he can close his car wash and just get back to being Jeff Kent. Great hitting second baseman, longevity, pretty decent defender, nothing extraordinary. But, second base is a position where there's just not many guys that produce like Jeff Kent. And to that end, I think you got to put him in. Paul Konerko is a no for me. 24 Fangraphs WAR, played for the Dodgers, Reds, and White Sox. Believe it or not, came up as a catcher. But, incredible hitter. I saw it up close in Minnesota, but just not enough all around to get into the Hall of Fame. Moving along here, Cliff Lee, also a no for me. 48.2 Fangraphs WAR. For me, if Johan Santana doesn't get the support that he deserves, Cliff Lee falls in the same bucket. Similar peaks, just different times of their career. Santana was, I think, a little bit younger. Lee was a later bloomer, both with the Indians. And then also Mariners just ever so briefly, and then Rangers and Phillies. But again, yeah, if Johan Santana doesn't get support, it's hard for me to imagine giving it to Cliff Lee. If Santana gets in, and if Santana wins the Cy Young in 2005 like he should have, obviously he gets a longer look, then I think Cliff Lee gets in too, and I'm a big Hall guy, and I think they both deserve to be in, but on a limited ballot with only 10 guys that you can vote for, Cliff Lee is a no. Carlos Pena, also a no, most handsome guy on the ballot, but not even 20 Fangraphs WAR, played with like a billion teams, just not enough staying power there. Brad Penny, also a no. To me, he was kind of like the Kevin Millwood of the late 90s Braves. He didn't really get the accolades of the A.J. Burnett or the Josh Beckett, but was a terrific pitcher in his own right, just not the level to which you put someone in the Hall of Fame. And that brings us to another difficult one, Andy Pettitte, who was my last yes. I was kind of combing back and forth. 68.2 Fangraphs WAR, in my opinion, puts you in on merit alone. And the PED stuff was strange because he got HGH as a prescription basically through his severely ill father, which is, kind of sounds like a criminal enterprise. I'm not an expert on law or anything, but that strikes me as kind of strange. But at the end of the day, probably gets in, one of the best left-handed pitchers of his entire era, guy that had, that dead-eye stare, would kill you in October, and just incredible. So Pettitte goes in as a player for me. Certainly have some questions about the personal stuff, but we were going to let him in this way. J.J. Putz, another one of those weird candidates, not really sure why he's on the ballot at all. But, one of the best relievers in baseball in 2006 and then again in 2007. Had a 1.38 ERA in 2007, but, we're not putting him into the Hall of Fame. Manny Ramirez is a yes for me. Maybe the most terrifying right-handed hitter across his era. I think you can make a case for Albert Bell early on there, Vlad Guerrero, Gary Sheffield, probably a few others. Terrible defender, but the bat was just that good. Again, you've got question marks of what he may or may not have been doing in terms of to hit like that. But again, if baseball had a bigger problem with it, they should have punished him more than they did. So, I'm sure I don't stand alone. I'm maybe not in the majority there, but I would put Manny Ramirez in. Brian Roberts, pretty easy no, but had a really brilliant peak, just couldn't stay healthy after age 32, I believe it was, but really, really nice second baseman. Scott Rowland is a yes for me. 69.9 Fangraphs WAR, played with the Phillies, Cardinals, Blue Jays, and Reds. Don't necessarily remember the Blue Jays there, but that could be just on me. Just absolutely brilliant on both sides of the baseball. Could really feel, could really hit. I think health was the only thing separating him from being a modern-day Mike Schmidt. Does health factor in? I mean, it factors in how well you play because of how much you play, but he played enough to me to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, almost 70 WAR gets you in from my point of view. So Scott Rowland is in. I don't know if he's going to get the kind of support he needs. I could see a Larry Walker-type candidacy for him where he's going to need a groundswell of support late. But to me, Scott Rowland should be in, no question about it. Curt Schilling's a yes for me. The only note I wrote was I don't like it. Almost 80 career WAR. Orioles, Astros, Phillies, Diamondbacks, Red Sox. Just don't like it. I'm not sure if that's a cop-out, if I should be saying more than that, but I just don't like it. Gary Sheffield, to me, is a no on this ballot, but a yes on an unlimited ballot. Never found a defensive home, but God, could he hit. Again, unlimited ballot, large hall ballot, get him in there, but I can't get him in on this ballot. The divider for him, Bobby Abreu and a couple other hitters, Todd Helton. really hard to differentiate between them on a very, 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 with conviction kind of thing. So, again, with an unlimited ballot, those guys get in. Alfonso Soriano's a no for me, but the peak was there until he went to the Rangers and put up 4.6 Fangraphs WAR over 2 years, age 28, 29. That's your peak. You really gotta hit if you're gonna. You really gotta hit and play well those seasons if you're gonna get in, and he just didn't do it. So, Sammy Sosa again, a no for me. On an unlimited ballot, I'd probably put him in, but he could hit, he could run, he could field. He was a late bloomer because of some, he just was a very unpolished player with the Rangers and then the White Sox. But once things took hold with him, they really took off. He could really, really field more than I think people even realize. He had a rocket of an arm. Certainly questions again off the field, but boy, baseball didn't seem to care when they were having that race between him and Mark McGwire in 1998. So it's not too hard for me to look the other way there. Jose Valverde, pretty easy no. Papa Grande, to me, was a cross between like Fernando Rodney and Armando Benitez. Real fun personality, could throw the ever-loving crap out of the ball, but just was never super stable on the mound as far as like you could trust him real well. Had a nice little career, but just no. Omar Vizquel, this is probably going to be controversial, but he's a no for me. He was just a terrific defender, but he was not close to Ozzie defensively. And offensively, he was behind Ozzie. Ozzie had a 90 weighted runs created plus. Vizquel was 83. You got to compare their eras. Vizquel played in a little bit more of an offensive era, and just wasn't quite the defender. I'm not totally sure Ozzie was a slam dunk. I'd have to go back and do my own research as well. But Omar wasn't Ozzie. That's just that's like saying Torrey Hunter was Andrew Jones. It's just because you're really good doesn't mean you're equal. So. No, and it took him 24 years to pick up like 40, 45 WAR, depending on how you look at it. That's less than 2 per year. To me, no, it's just not there. Billy Wagner for me is a yes, 24.0 career Fangraphs WAR. Most dominant left-handed reliever since, fill in the blank. Who are you going to put there? There's a sliding scale for relievers. Obviously, 24 WAR is not that impressive, but it's 6th all-time for Fangraphs WAR for relievers, behind Mariano Rivera, Goose Gossage, Raleigh Fingers, Trevor Hoffman, and Lee Smith. And guess what? They're all Hall of Famers, so I think you got to put in Billy Wagner as well. And finally, Larry Walker, yes, he's my 10th one. 1989 to 2005, played with the Expos, Rockies, Cardinals. He's in for me, and if you want to talk about the Coors effect, let's talk about 1994. In Montreal, he hit .322, .394, .587. He was going to crush no matter where he played. You could have traded him to the desert. He was going to crush the baseball. Yes, Coors was crazy back then. We have adjusted stats that tell us he was like 40% above the league average. Even still, pretty good fielder, pretty good arm. The guy could play. He's a Hall of Famer, and there's no doubt about that in my mind. So again, we'll look at the ballot. My 10, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Derek Jeter, Andrew Jones, Andy Pettitte, Manny Ramirez, Scott Rowland, Curt Schilling, Billy Wagner, and Larry Walker. Who are your 10? Do you have less than 10? Would you have more than 10 if the ballot allowed it? Drop us a line in the comments. Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Warren. Otherwise, this has been the first episode of Saneball. Hopefully you'll come back and check us out. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll talk to you later. Peace.